Hello, welcome and good evening. This is The Insight. And well, on The Insight tonight, we get to deeply and deliberately interrogate the state of the economy, even as we do this through the lenses of one Sir Ronald N. Bosi, who is an audit, tax and financial expert, amongst many other titles that he holds. We get to look at the economy and ask very pertinent questions that otherwise, through which, without this, you will not have gotten the answers. Well, our social media pages are at Eugene Ochieng, at GBS TV Africa, 2144 is also our SMS line, where you get to talk to us, get to interact with us, even as we delve deeply through these. Yes. So, welcome so much, Mr. Ronald.
Thank you, Eugene.
Yes, you're welcome to the show. We're talking about the economy generally.
Yes.
And tell us, Mr. Ronald, what is the current state of the economy as it stands?
I believe the current economy, words from the streets and the way all of us know, there's a bit of a struggle in terms of people being able to afford the basic needs, yes. Food, housing, people able to access to medical health care, and mostly, you know, the drought that is existing there that has rendered most people in a very difficult position.
Yes.
So as it is now, we can't say that the economy is good, but it's really, really bad for most people.
Okay.
And that is the state of the economy now, both from the words from the streets and the way you know it. Me and you, we have experienced it. It's not an easy time for each one of us. Yes.
Okay. When we talk about the state of the economy, of course, we also talk about high rate of unemployment, of course, the cost of living, amongst many other numerous economic challenges. Well, some believe that it's a political, actually it's a political problem.
Yes,
I don't know how you see it or how you view it generally when you talk about these economic situations being political.
I can't say it's a political, because of course politics has an impact on the economy of a country, because it is mostly politicians who make economic laws in a country. When you look at the tax regime, it's the politicians that are in charge of it. And most oftenly, they will make it either for political expedience or for the good of the economy in the country. But significantly, you know, politicians will make decisions based on the political viability of those. And that's the biggest challenge when it comes to economic decisions that are supposed to be made to ensure that a country is in a better position economically.
Do you believe that the system, generally, when you talk about the system, when you bring politics in economy, is there a system that is designed to make some people unemployed to maybe for certain reasons?
Of course, the system may not be deliberately, but by virtue of the actions of the politicians, they might render some people unemployed. And one of the things that we're talking about, if you look at it like now, we talk about high rate of corruption. And corruption is one of the things that will render people unemployed, you know, and maybe either with knowingly or unknowingly.
Yes.
If there is corruption whereby now there's a time we're saying, that because there are people who are out of government, this is the time to reward our people. There's a challenge in terms of decision making, whereby you allocate money for a certain item or a certain cause, and that money is appropriated. You see, those are some of the economic factors that will render people unemployed, because you know when drugs are not in the hospital, because maybe somebody squandered money, then there will be no viability in the hospitals, and then the doctors will not be employed because there are no drugs. You know, you had about this almost 4,000 doctors who are not employed. If there's maybe sabotage in terms of manufacturing sector, people are importing goods from countries and they're not paying duty, you know, at the port, then that is going to render people jobless, because instead of manufacturing locally, people find it cheaper to import in in other countries and then not pay duty because of corruption, and then renders our industries redundant or useless because they are not able to compete favorably with other markets. Because most markets in the world, they are given incentives to export to other countries in order to correct the balance of trade. But see, when the corruption is so much in a country, and then people are spending most of their money importing goods rather than manufacturing locally, that is one of the things that is going to make people unemployed. So unemployment is actually it's a result of political decisions, and those decisions might impact on the people very negatively. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you talk about corruption generally, which has been institutionalized in our system, as an auditor generally, because you have audited even the government at a certain time. Well, what is generally your professional understanding or remedy to this situation generally? What can be done? What are the economic issues that can be used maybe to tap these ballooning cases of corruption?
Thank you, Eugene. And you've actually brought in something that, especially in my capacity as an auditor, what should I do, or what can we do as a profession? And one of the things that you need to know that auditors have always been writing things called management letters or reports on the financial performance of different ministries, of different counties, of different state entities and state organs. And you've heard even from the Auditor General himself, from other players in the industry, in my profession, that the biggest challenge we have as a country is implementation of those reports. Because, if you have auditors pointing out at certain malpractices, how are we good as a country to go and implement that? And you see, that's not the role of an auditor. The role of an auditor might not be tasked with the implementation of the audit findings or recommendations is giving it. It's the role of the industry players. It's the role of the anti-corruption entity. It's the role of public prosecution. It's the role of other players, and of course with the government of the day goodwill to implement those findings regarding economic crimes, regarding misappropriation of funds and for different ministries. And you've heard that a significant portion, or probably a third of the Kenyan budget, you've told from the previous regime, goes into, into corruption. But even leave alone corruption, the wastages that are there in some of the institutions, it's so rampant that, reasonably thinking, there is no way we will experience economic viability. And and before these reports of different watchdog entities that are implemented, especially like the auditor's recommendations and findings, what degree of, at what extent do we take the seriousness of those recommendations and hold those people who have been adversely mentioned accountable? So that's the biggest gap that exists in terms of implementing the recommendations of different auditors and different watchdog institutions that actually bring out the malpractices, financial malpractices that are happening in various government institutions and state corporations and in the county governments and county government entities.
And it's quite interesting when you mention all these institutions, because it brings a question about a system.
Yes.
And generally my question will be like, what economic system does Kenya actually have that makes it even easier for the corrupt to sail through, that makes it easier for such these issues that you're mentioning get into our system that will make us even not succeed well economically?
The thing is, of course, we are a democratic nation. We have actually succeeded in installing good governance, and in terms of democracy, whereby there is peaceful transition from one government to another. That's a big milestone. So the thing is, what is our culture as a nation? And I said sometimes back, the biggest impact that any leader can create in a society it's not the stroke of the pen impact. Stroke of the pen is like building roads.
Okay.
It's like digging dams. Those are what we call stroke of the pen roles of a leader. But we have another very important leadership responsibility that we require from a leader, which we call a behavioral role. Behavioral role is the leader's role whereby he changes behaviors of a country. Because our biggest problem as a country is not issues to do with stroke of the pen. Because stroke of the pen is easy. You can easily go borrow money, construct roads. You can borrow money, dig dams. You can borrow money, establish other infrastructural products. But if you don't change our culture, our behavior as a nation, then we will be in trouble. So the biggest problem as a country is behavioral change.
Okay.
And that's why, one of the biggest impact that Kibaki created, besides building Thika Superhighway, that's not the greatest of all. The greatest of all was changing our mindset,
Okay.
which is one of the primary leadership responsibility that a good leader should do. You might do so much as a leader, but how much have you changed the culture, the mindsets, the behavior of your fellow, the people who are looking after you, and influence their thinking for a successful economy. So that is a problem with our economy, that we've concentrated on stroke of the things, financial expenditure, but not looked at can we change our character as a country, so that we're not competing in terms of how much money me and you have, but we are competing in what impact have you created with your venture on the society. How many people have you employed? How many, how have you influenced climate change? How have you, so that even as you make money, you've left an impact on the society. So until we see, we now pride ourselves on creating an impact on the society rather than making more money, then that is going to remain a problem. So what I will implore on leaders is to actually concentrate, even from a county level, not only build for people dams or whatever, roads, and that's good, hospitals and all that, but change mindset of people. People must know that for you to make money, you must offer a solution, not just getting money for free. Until we start asking with each one of us that, okay, I see you have a big car, you have a big house, what solutions did you provide to come to where you are? Yes, that has this issue of being able to boast about how much we have without being accountable on what we have done to get what we have is the biggest problem. So we've become so capitalistic without being capitalistic of ideas. We've become capitalistic of wealth. So we need to transform from being capitalistic of money, but capitalistic of ideas that will give us money while causing an impact.
Okay.
Yes. So talking about what economy we are, capitalistic, but at the same time without character, meaning that it doesn't matter the process. They say the end justifies the means.
Yes.
We must now means the means justifies the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quite interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about culture.
Yes.
You're talking about our safe system being capitalistic.
Yes.
But you're saying that culture, the character must be changed, the mindset generally.
Of course.
But there's a very great aspect of successful economy, and that is savings generally, which I'd love you maybe to speak about when we bring about ideas on how to resuscitate our economy. We have brought in the recent times about savings. Generally, what do you make of it?
Savings is a good, but you cannot save what you don't have. You must have what you want to save.
Yes.
So I like the way the government is really campaigning and telling people to save, the introduction of rates with the NSSF, increasing the rates for people. But you need to ask yourself, even with their earnings, are they guaranteed of this future that you want to create for them?
Yes.
Because you save when you are sure about the future, when the future is guaranteed. But you can't save when you don't have.
Okay.
If you are earning a salary of 15,000 or 20,000, you are living on the edge. And you are saying save for the future, and you cannot afford school fees for your children. You cannot afford hospital bills. You cannot afford to put food on the table. And somebody is telling you about the future. The future can only be guaranteed if you secure people's current well-being, if you ensure the current well-being. You can look at how the inflation has hit. Currently, the fuel price is gone on a crazy price. The inflation rate was another level. Even if you pay people 20,000 or 15,000, they are not able to afford to just even put food on the table. So saving is just like a song. So the first thing is, even though we need to say that we need to rally people to save, but we need to ask ourselves, at what budget, if I'm earning the minimum wage, or maybe in Nairobi of about 14,000, can I be able to afford a house?
Yes. Okay.
Can I be able to afford food? Can I be able to afford healthcare for my children? And can I take my children to school? And then how much money am I making? Has the government done that calculation and say, we see you're supposed to remain with 2,000 or 1,000 which you can save, or 300 shillings which you are supposed to save,
Yes.
and you are not saving. So you see, people are not able to afford their basic needs, and that is the biggest impact on savings.
Yes.
And number two, these organizations that you are saying that you are going to deduct a part of your money, and then the employee tops up the other amount, are they even able to pay their basic salary? How many companies are struggling now? They are being disrupted because of huge inflation. The industries are being inflated. The industries that are being disrupted because of increased import, the reason is because the Kenyan economy cannot support manufacturing, cannot support sustainably you doing business in this country. Yeah.
When you talk about issues inflation, actually, generally in the according to the previous regime, when they were talking about tough conditions of life, generally economically, they talked about global economic hurdles. And of course, this regime is also talking about the same. But some people may not get to understand. What does, when you talk about global economy, what do you mean? How is it affecting Kenya's economy generally? Why do you talk about inflation? And then, of course, you say it's affected globally, generally. How?
Of course, any country is influenced, or any, because, countries does not operate in silos. It's likely that if we have issues in Ukraine, Russia war, and you have China decreasing the rate of manufacturing because of the COVID-19, and you have issues in America and the rising dollar globally, scale, any country is going to receive to be able to face the consequences and to take share in the global problems. But this, you are talking about leadership with a difference, because how can the leadership remain outstanding? Because as a leader, I was reading a book and I was told that there is no leader, even in the biblical times, or there was no king who became without confronting a war. And war in this sense might mean real war, like we're having in Ukraine. It will be hunger, it will be terrorism, it will be, any sort of war. Even hunger is war. Like today what we are receiving is war. So leaders are accredited on how do they navigate those difficult times. So today, and one of the things that Eugene really makes me feel saddened is when I watch leaders propagating hopelessness, telling us, put on your belts because the future is going to be trouble and tough. That is not the role of leader. The leader should be a source of hope. It's a source of inspiration. He should tell people, we are in this circumstance today, but tomorrow we are going to make it. Leader should be inspirational leadership, whereby you're trying to inspire people to give hope, because people are dying of hunger, and you tell them the future is going to be, to be tough. People don't have, cannot access healthcare. People are sick. They cannot access basic medical healthcare, and you're telling them the future is going to be tough, belt up. You are telling them they are going to die because they have reached the end. So leader should be a source of hope, even in terms of turbulence, global turbulence. A good leader will say, even in spite of all that, remain of good courage. We are going to stir this country into success. We are fixing 1, 2, 3, 4. Remain hopeful. This is the strategy that we are using, and you can see it. Okay.
You've talked about government strategy, and the ruling party is Kenya Kwanza. The sitting government, it had a manifesto built on economic resuscitation. It was dubbed the plan, and which was anchored generally on 6 major pillars. That was eradicating hunger. It was geared generally to bringing down cost of living, eradicating hunger, creating jobs, expanding the tax base, improving the country's foreign exchange balance. But now the pillars are agriculture, micro, small and medium enterprise economy, housing and settlement, healthcare, digital superhighway, and creative economy, environment and climate change. Well, the government has been in power for quite some time now. And my question is, how do you rate their commitment to the plan and its effects so far in bettering Kenya's economy? As a financial expert, you know where we were last year or in the previous regime and where we are now and where we are heading. What actually are the plans that are being made to resuscitate our economy according to the plan that the Kenya Kwanza had? If
you look at those pillars that we all trusted them and voted for them, they're very good pillars and they're very good. This is a very good thing. If you look at agriculture, that's what you need. Resuscitation of the economy is very important. Climate change is those are very good. And IT infrastructure is very, very brilliant ideas by this Kenya Kwanza government. The biggest challenge that we have with this government is implementation of some of these things. For instance, let's talk about agriculture. Agriculture is impacted by a number of factors. One is the issue of weather, climate change. Two, agriculture is impacted by the cost of inputs. I've seen governments say, now we have subsidized fertilizer. Yes, fertilizer is good and it's a very critical component of agriculture, but it's not the only one. If you go to farming, these tractors that are used to do to dig and prepare the land. Tractors, what do tractors use? They use fuel. The cost of fuel is on a very high level. So you will have a cheap fertilizer, but you'll be compensated by high cost of fuel that is on a crazy note. Number two, you will also have other factors. Sometimes you need to import some of these machineries. You can see the inflation, the way the Kenya shilling is on a high note. It has actually increased the cost of machinery, farm input, which mostly we are importing those farm machineries. So even though, and also now electricity also, which is used also on the farm. So you find that even though you have reduced the price of fertilizer, there are other farm inputs that have skyrocketed many times, much more than what it was, affecting the ability of farmers to reproduce. So even though government wants to actually increase the cost of production, they need to look for other factors. They need to look at fuel. How do we, and one of the things I will implore this government is not to shy away from subsidies. Globally, people are saying, there's those in the government say we will not subsidize and all that. But see, subsidize is part of tax. Subsidize is money removed from tax to try and look at some of the areas that you cannot influence by. There's two ways you can use tax in order to correct the economic imbalance. Either you tax that, you remove the taxes, or you get the taxes and use to subsidize. So, if you have not removed the taxes, you're even imposing more taxes, and you're not giving the subsidies, you can't correct the economic imbalance. And you need to subsidize or eliminate taxes for your key economic drivers. Like fuel is a key economic driver. Electricity is a key economic driver. You either have to remove taxes or to tax and get the money, to tax other industries and subsidize those industries to correct economic imbalance. Because if all of us end up to be consumers and we stop production, it will become more cheaper for us to import from other competing nations than to reproduce locally.
Well, and you're talking about taxes, which has also been an issue of debate in the political arena, where the opposition has been telling Kenyans to shun punitive taxes from the government. And of course, in one of the pillars of this Kenya Kwanza government was to expand the tax base, where it will help them actually in building the economy of Kenya. But now they're talking about the taxes has been actually increased. The levels of taxes have been increased. And there's change in tax regime where people are not sure whether this tax will be the same this month and next month. How will it be? Now there's a question that actually has been there, a debate. And then where are this tax money being taken to? Now these are critical questions that are being actually asked. And now, from your view, what do you make of the taxes or the tax issues in Kenya generally?
Yeah, one of the biggest misunderstanding, also misconceptions, especially about taxes, is when most governments talk about increasing the tax bracket. There's been a misconception is that you need to now go deeper to the hustlers and tax them anyhow. Yes, everybody needs to pay their fair share of taxes, but you cannot tax poverty. The first thing before, if you want to tax people and tax them sustainably, create an environment of wealth. Because you cannot go to people cooking mandazi on the roadside, go to kiosks, go to border borders, go to Gikomba and tax people at a very low end of the market. This in taxation, there's something we call the value for money, even in terms of collection. It will not even make economic sense for the taxman to pursue people at the low end of the economy. And I've said even in previous conversations with Eugene, the most sustainable way to get more taxes, and especially when you're talking about creating or increasing the tax base, it's not necessarily taxing more people, it's creating more people who can pay taxes, creating economic viability. If industries are closing, last time we've had companies closing in this country, multinationals coming and shutting down, we are losing taxes, and we are only remaining hanging on their, on them and saying, oh, they have not paid that tax, they have not paid all that tax. But see, we are losing very taxpayers by shutting down industries. We are losing taxpayers when they miss out on our country and go to invest in our neighbors. Those are taxpayers. I can tell you one of the taxes that is very important in this country, the highest tax yield in this country is from pay as you earn. And I can tell you, the government concentrates on other tax drivers at the expense of the key critical tax, because pay as you earn, when you get more people employed, you create more taxes. So how do you get more people employed? Is to encourage more people to establish formal businesses that they are able to pay significant. How do you get people to establish formal business? Is to create an environment that encourages, one, the tax regime. You realize that things like the other government, in the Finance Act, or the tax amendment bill during the COVID-19, they eliminated most of the capital deductions, especially in the manufacturing industry. They reduced them, most of them from 100% to 50%. Then you wonder, what are our priorities? So you want to get to tax somebody before he starts doing his business, and then you lose that person, goes in another country, and yet you'll have even gotten a lot of money from pay as you earn by creating more employment. And sometimes when some of these multinationals even come in the country, they come with a lot of employees, expatriates, and they pay them huge money from their countries because those are companies in the startup, and you'll be able to recover pay as you earn. And this pay as you earn is able to be used to grow the economy. So we need to shift our mindset from the thinking that growing tax base is only referring to getting more people to pay taxes. Of course, there's an element of trying to fight the non-compliance, but it's also the biggest driver for increasing the tax base is creating an environment for industries to thrive, for more people to start business, and leave alone even the people coming from abroad to start business. Locally, how have we supported our entrepreneurs? How have we? And I can tell you, if you go to our neighboring countries like Uganda, you go to Tanzania, there are so many Kenyans, you will find that they have gone, even they are thinking of going to establish, or they have established factories in those countries, in the neighboring countries.
Yes.
Because and sometimes they import now those goods in this country. And that is even a big challenge on our shilling, because now we are taking more money, importing all that. So you find that even locals who are not encouraged to do business because of a poor tax regime, lack of support in terms of infrastructure, probably lack of education, lack of high interest rates. Now you're having interest rate rising. And the way we see and predict, these interests are going to be crazy. We see probably interests are going to hit probably 20%, 25%. Most financial institutions, I'm told, is now about 18%, which is a very sad state of the country. Because if you don't have capital in the country, there's no way you go to grow a business. Look at our shilling. Now, to get dollars, the Kenya shilling is being devalued and devalued every day. If you have any savings in the bank, talking about this NSF selling, by the time you are saving like 200,000 shillings, thinking that money will help you, that money cannot buy anything, because when you want to import anything, it's being imported in dollars. That shilling, that 200 shillings is worth 20,000 after like 5 years, because of the increase in devaluation of the currency within which you have saved in. So the amount of goods that you can buy. So there are more to taxes than just increasing the tax bracket by pursuing more people. And I can tell you, the biggest problem in this country has not been collection of taxes. The biggest problem is expenditure on those taxes. If you're told 30% of government revenue is through pilferage, the way we have had it from the media, from past leaders, then it's a big problem. Then that is the priority. If you're told, and that is even still, what about paying for people in the government who don't produce results? What about for unnecessary meetings? What about for unnecessary, some of the state corporations that are almost dying, we're just injecting in money, they're just like dead. You know, there's so much extravagance and wastage that needs to be managed before now we pursue even now more taxes. But the more we increase the taxes on the few people and chase others, so they remain, the fewer they become, the more we tax. The fewer the taxpayers become, the more we tax them, because we have to get a lot of tax from these few players who are formal. The more we destroy the economy, the more we stare at a very big economic meltdown.
Okay. Yes. And the last point was about punitive taxes, actually, with the opposition was talking about.
Yeah.
And the question of where is the government taking these taxes?
Yeah.
Because they are not seeing any changes generally. Maybe in a minute.
Yeah, and to be fair and just to this government, most of the taxes that are coming into play today were introduced by the previous tax through the Finance Act. And this government was not part of the Finance Act of the previous year, because the Finance Act was signed up last year just before elections, around July that the Finance Act came into play. So those Finance Acts, the Finance Act recommendations, most of the taxes are coming into play from 1st January, like capital gains, 15% is coming into play from 1st January this year. But that does not mean that this government has no role to play, because they are the owners of these taxes. They need now to come and say, how can we review because they have the powers, the treasury, the CS treasury has the power in consultation with the president to try to review these taxes and say, okay, these ones, we will be able to put a halt on them. Let's wait. Let's see where the economy is going. Because there are some punitive taxes that have been, like capital gains that has been now introduced. It's going to really, really increase the cost of property in this country. Buying a house is going to be expensive because of capital gains. Yeah. Now, you know, you've had excise duty being introduced on airtime, and you know, in so many products now we have excise duty. Or even on water. You know, water should be a basic need, but when you increase excise duty on basic things like water, where do you want people to go? Because some people not everybody has access to tap water that is clean. So there are people who live, especially in the other side, who depend on this bottled water, and you are taxing them, and their income is not growing, and you are saying that bottled water is a luxury. It's not a luxury for everybody. It's a basic need. So you are saying, if you can afford tap water, we excise due, you increase the excise duty. So the government needs to review those punitive taxes and make them in a reasonable level, so that to make the life of a common Mwananchi bearable.
So they exist actually?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Ronald. We're taking a very short break, but of course we are coming back talking about the economy still, one-on-one discussion with Sir Ronald and Bossy, of course, who is a group managing director.
Yeah.
Yes, audit, tax, financial expert is here with us. We're going for a short break, but we'll be back.
Thank you.
Nakukaribisha tena katika makao makuu yako katika ulimwengu wa michezo.
Yoga is not a sport. Yoga is actually a way of life.
Ukiona FIFA inaingilia kati, it means that
the FIFA rules have been violated.
From day one akiingia kwa academy yako, unamwambia masomo na talent lazima ziende. The moment nasikia masomo imeenda chini, hata time out. Hata hiyo time out kwa football na kando.
Yeah, wanawake ni wengi actually mpaka saa hizi. Tumekaa ni kama tumekuwa wanawake wamekuwa wengi kuliko wanaume. Kuna wale ambao ni artistic. Yes, wanapenda mambo ya kuigiza.
I am coded to look for solutions.
You limit yourself, not the sport doesn't limit you.
We say a dedicated women-only show that focuses only on women.
It has been a nice experience seeing, young men coming, learning things to do with filming, and also bringing out the passion that lays underneath. Then I'm very much happy because I know and I believe that soon they will also make a living out of it.
Everywhere, GBS.
Thank you so much for staying with this live broadcast. 22144 is our SMS line at GBS TV Africa at Eugene Ching Kwach. Well, we are continuing with this conversation on the economy. We talked about taxes before the break, but again, I want us to discuss on a certain issue that is affecting our economy, we believe, and that is privatization of public corporations, which actually the government, that is the Kenya Kwanza government, has taken, it's actually something that is happening. We have seen secondary schools being privatized and other public corporations generally. But the major question that has been, what really are the economic implications to this? Because maybe the government says that it is doing this for the good of the economy generally. So what is the economic implications of privatization of these public corporations?
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. One of the things that we all appreciate that some of these state corporations have become a white elephant. It's a reality that the government sometimes constantly pumps huge sums of taxpayers' money into some of these government entities that are not able to provide anything sensible. There are those government entities that we'll all agree that they are very important to be owned by the government, and privatizing them might not bring meaningful results. I've been always not really supporting the idea of privatizing like a company like Kenya Airways. because Kenya Airways, for me, from where I view it, should not be considered as an organization, a profitable entity, but more of a strategic national resource. Actually, Kenya Airways, I think it will be in the best interest of the country probably to run it under Kenya Tourism Board, because it will be used more if we view Kenya Airways as a strategic national resource rather than as a business. Probably we will have meaningful use for it, so that we ask ourselves how many tourists have been influenced by Kenya Airways. One time I'm traveling with some passengers from a certain country, and they're like, we really love Kenya just because of the experience we have had traveling with Kenya Airways. And that is a very important national resource. And if you go to foreign countries, you go just park Kenya Airways in London, you park in China, you park it in the US. It's a statement that people will know Kenya exists as a tourist destination, and people will ask you, what about this Kenya? And I believe that Kenya Airways could be managed as a strategic national resource rather than as a business. Probably that one will restructure it. Because you look at what Emirates has done to Dubai. Because Emirates making a Dubai a tourism destination, because most of us, a big percentage of us from Africa have gone to Dubai courtesy of Emirates while connecting to other countries, to Europe, to America, to China. And that has positioned Dubai as a tourism destination. And you realize that in Kenya, we depend so much on tourism. What is the driver of this tourism? This tourism will not come on their own. We have to also create infrastructure, a transport system that is enabling the country to serve this tourism. You see, most West Africans come to Nairobi before they go to South Africa. South African Airlines has been troubled. Kenya Airways has been used mostly as a link, and people come. How do you market to them your country as a tourism destination? And that will bring in more foreign exchange through tourism, and probably that will compensate the losses that the company is making. But there are other government entities that the government owns, especially the agricultural entities, that are not making any money. They've just become some very deep holes whereby we're putting money and like burying it. Those entities, it is in the best interest of us as a country to privatize them, because some of the people, especially public servant employees working in those entities, they're just probably just sitting there. There's nothing economically viable happening in some of those state corporations. So those state corporations should be privatized, but again with caution, because you might realize that the biggest challenge we will have is undervaluation of those private entities. So there must be inbuilt proper controls, checks and balances to ensure that this privatization is done in the most transparent manner with a high level of efficiency and objectiveness, so that we don't just like give out these public resources to private individuals, but also ensuring, and sometimes besides even just privatizing them, probably could be leases. Like I know places whereby the government has idle property. You've heard about huge pieces of land owned by the government. Instead of selling them to private people, you could give leases to people to do private farming. Like in the Galana Kulalo, why should be the government fighting so much to do agriculture? It is not possible for the government to go to farm, reproduce food, and put food on your table. That can only be done by private individuals. And if the government cannot sell that property, it could give you a lease and give you some terms of the leases, which means, one, you have to keep the land productive up to a certain level. And I can tell you that is what is happening in Tanzania. Today, I've seen an advert from Tanzania advertising huge parcels of land for rent, for lease to private individuals, and even given targets in terms of how you're supposed to utilize those resources. And if we don't watchful, now Tanzania is the one that is going to feed us, because Tanzania has a significant piece of land, So if they can use that land and they privatize it in a more strategic manner, then we become dependent to them. So as a country, we need to look at how do we privatize that, make those institutions more efficient, save taxpayers money instead of pumping money, huge billions of shillings from our budget to those institutions, privatize them, lease them, and use the money for the government roles, healthcare, hospitals. You realize that it is not possible for the government to be buying medicine, manage doctors to treat these people, privatize some of those hospitals, and so that the government concentrates on the most strategic issues of giving like vaccines and managing the healthcare systems and putting up infrastructure and a tax regime that is favorable for private players to create favorable healthcare institutions in the country, because the government has lost in that regard. You realize for most of hospitals, the government, like in the previous regime, they built most of hospitals without drugs, and maybe some doctors who might be on payroll and they're not in those places, and those doctors there, they lack basic machineries, with ambulances that don't have fuel, that have packed, they cannot bring any meaningful cost. Privatize those institutions, but in a more balanced environment where there is objectivity and the government maintains their core mandate of providing infrastructure and environment whereby these organizations can be thriving.
I think there's a mixed reactions between which institutions should actually be privatized by the government, and which ones should not be privatized.
Yes.
I don't know which angle you're looking at it, but generally, what do you think the government can use maybe to ensure, what generally can they use to measure the importance, or which institutions generally to privatize and which ones to lease and which ones to remain with?
You know, as I said, that there are, and if you heard from the previous CS Treasurer talking about institutions, the government, the institutions that are able to give dividends to the government, he mentioned them. He mentioned the Kenya Airports Authority. There was KenGen and others, maybe just a few, a handful of them that are able to operate sustainably and give back the money to the government.
There are those that have been privatized, but there are still mixed reactions on whether they should even be privatized in the first place.
Yeah, so there are those organizations that are operating sustainably under the government. And there are also those organizations that are drivers to an economy. You see, like Kenya Power, if you privatize it without a strategy and you privatize 100% and the power bills hit a roof, you know, there's a private sector that can hold the economy hostage. That's why it's in the interest of every government to control the power producing companies. But of course, ensure there is efficiency and there's effectiveness so that that organization operates competitively. Because the biggest challenge we have, even those organizations that are very critical to an economy, they are being very inefficient and passing the cost of operation to the taxpayers inefficiently. So one, there are those entities that are very strategic to any economy, like power, like of course the Kenya Pipeline in terms of fuel, because fuel is very strategic to any economy. You cannot completely 100% privatize fuel because that is what is required to spur productivity. You have those probably maybe media, especially if you look at some of these media broadcasting sector, because which are mostly strategic communication channels for the government, especially on government business, they can retain those ones. But those other commercial entities that are actually competing with private entities, especially in agriculture, you know, you can privatize them effectively, and they will run more efficiently, and as a government you will minimize wastage in those particular entities.
Okay, let's talk about Kenya's debt. The borrowing generally. Because Kenya continues to borrow to sustain its expenditure. The previous regime, that is the one that was led by President Uhuru Kenyatta, borrowed massively. And of course, even the government that we are in, the Kenya Kwanza government, is also borrowing a lot to sustain its expenditure. And the question tonight is whether this borrowing or the debt that we have, is it even sustainable?
You know, the debts that we have, even now today, if you borrow from Kenyan banks, the Kenyan banks now are raising interest punitively to those debt lenders, the borrowers. And the borrowers sometimes reach somewhere and become captive of the lenders. And that's the essence even for us as a country. We borrow and we become captives of the lenders, because now lenders start calling shots and you lose your sovereignty as a country. Debt is not bad, but there is a level of debt that is within your control that you must actually maintain. So the biggest challenge we have as a country, our debt is skyrocketing. And going from the president's remarks the other day, he says that 60% of our taxes is used to repay debt. Then are we able to operate sustainably with the remaining 40%. Why have we borrowed 60% of the debt and we have not increased our income through industrialization? Because most of these debts probably has gone to wastage, or it's been put on infrastructure that has not been, because you can put up infrastructure, but with a very funny tax regime that cannot encourage any form of industrialization or any form of businesses establishing themselves.
Yes.
So we need to see that we have borrowed we are paying 60% of our taxes back to debt. What did this debt do? And how can we fast track this debt? The biggest challenge and the biggest problem I will have with the government is to tax more people, the fewer people are remaining, to raise this amount of debt, money so that to repay the debts. Because the more you tax them, the more you shrink the economy. The more you tax them, the more you shrink the economy. And eventually, you will not have people to tax, or you will have an economy that has collapsed. I know I was reading of a certain city in America that most people were getting out of that town, and because of the fewer people, they were being taxed by the county government until people, the city actually crashed. Everybody ran away from the city. And this is what's happening even in Kenya. Because of the high tax regime, even business people, doctors are flying away. Most people are going to work abroad to run away from a high tax regime without equivalent opportunities for the citizens who are operating in that particular country. So the problem is, the challenge, the risk we have, we might tax people out of the country. Everybody will run from being taxed. People will go to other countries that like Mauritius or wherever to go and unlock capital and be able to now invest in the country from those areas, which is going to be a big problem. Meaning when they invest now, they export things to Kenya because there'll be a huge market, people, consumers, until a certain point people will not even be able to buy. And that's where you'll be very poverty stricken. So there must be a trade-off between taxation and economic development.
So where we are right now, is our debt sustainable?
The debt is, when you say you are paying 60% of your income to repay debt, that is not sustainable. You should use probably, it could be at 20, 30%. But the biggest problem is we have borrowed and we have not grown our income. So it is not sustainable. If we had borrowed and have grown your income, then it could be sustainable. So the priority for this government probably is to try to see how do we encourage more investors. What do investors want when they want to come to our country? Those people who start businesses, what is hindering them? Rather than coming to your company and we're just coming to tax you, we need to look at what profitability are you making. And you can see now KRA is pushing, now they have appealed this tax law of the minimum tax. We are saying now, we want to pursue you, whether you make losses, you have to pay a minimum tax. And people are borrowing to repay people are borrowing to sustain their business in the hope that their business will wake up. Now you are being told, even if you make losses and you have loans, you still have to get additional debt from the bank at additional interest to pay a minimum tax of 1%. The first question we need to ask ourselves, where are you making a loss? There's laws of transfer pricing to curb against any form of malpractices when it comes to losses. And if that is effectively applied, why do we want to pursue loss-making businesses so that we can derive money to pay our debts? So yes, debt is not sustainable, but the reason is because we have not used the debt to unlock more taxes through economic establishments. We've used debt, most part of the debt, 30% then we will say, has been corrupted.
Okay.
And then now the remaining 70%, probably we overcontracted. You've had government paying huge penalties for breach of contract, wasting taxpayers' money. We have heard from the media that there's a lot of taxes being wasted for breach of contract. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. And that is actually making our debt ceiling to be in a more deplorable situation.
And again, most of our conversations, you've been talking about taxes so much. But even as you talk about taxes, there's an aspect of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. And recently we got that our country, Kenya, got some some funds from the IMF generally, which have in turn actually seen what we are now experiencing, the taxes in electricity, in petroleum, and other products. And generally, the question is International Monetary Funds. What is its role generally in the global economy?
Of course, the role of the International Monetary Fund, as you've seen, and it's to lend money
Only
to countries. But you know, when you lend money in a country, or when somebody has your debt, and you look at that person, what is your priority? It's to recover the debt, irrespective of the future viability of that person. Of course, IMF cannot manage for us our country.
Okay.
It is in our individual responsibility to manage this country in our best interest, with our best understanding. If we cede our responsibility to our debt, the person who has lent us money, and then now we also cede our freedom of choice of making decisions, because IMF's priority, especially when it comes to increase this amount of taxes, their priority is to recover their debt.
Okay.
But the reason why sometimes I look at IMF and say, okay, what are they up to? Last time I was reading from the newspaper, they were stopping Kenya from implementing the digital tax of 1.5%. It means there are players outside there influencing the decisions of IMF. And IMF will say, don't give subsidies for fuel, don't reduce taxes, but digital tax, that one you have to do away with it.
Okay.
Then that is a very big so you need to query the interest of that person.
Okay.
Whose interest is he? But you see, we are becoming more indebted and probably with no choice.
Okay. Mr. Ronald, my director tells me that our time is over.
Yeah.
Maybe if you can just make a final remarks, even as we parting shot, as we end the show. But again, I would like you maybe to talk about the Hustler Fund in your parting shot. Because people are asking about the viability of Hustler Fund to our economic growth. Where is it from? Why has the government brought it? What is it going to help us in inspiring the economy generally? What do you think?
Especially from where I sit from, I have not understood the Hustler Fund. Of course, the government have a strategy, but I've had people getting 1,000, 3,000 bob. You see, the reason why I will not borrow is because I don't think 3,000 will really change my life. Then I have to pay the debt back. And I'm told you receive so much messages and all that. But I'm told there are people who really benefit from that. But again, even though the Hustler Fund might have an impact, there could be significant impact if the government uses a certain strategic, experienced business people to increase the productivity in this country, to increase the level of employment in this country. That money could also be alternatively used to spur economic development in the private sector, especially for established companies that are struggling. And maybe some things, and talking about the parting shot, I will want to say that there are a number of things, especially this being my government, especially for the next 5 years until elections are held, and hopefully for, again, another 5 years based on whatever people decide. There are a number of things that we expect, especially we in the private sector. One of the worrying trends is the issue of capital. The more interest rates are rising, it is going to limit people access to capital. And to unlock the economic development in any country, you have to avail capital. So the government needs to try to interrogate, and we like the Jude Jomo's bill last time that curtailed the interest rates for financial institutions to 13%. I believe us in the private sector thought that is more reasonable for us to pay. Even it's not comparative to other countries, but 13% was reasonable enough. But you see now the government is increasing interest rates, or because of the central bank, there is increases in interest rates almost every 3 months. That is going to affect economic growth, because we cannot even predict, because no business is growing every 3 months, but every 3 months your financial institution says you interests have grown. So one of the government priorities will be how do we avail capital to private players at reasonable cost. The next thing they need to do is talk about availing, they avail capital, and the next thing they avail markets. Because for any country to grow, for you to engage yourself in production activities, you might be assured to market.
Okay.
And if you look at across Africa, there's what we call African Free Trade Area Agreement. There's available opportunities across Africa. If Kenyans, we can be told we can plant avocados, we can plant tomatoes, food, and export to other countries, that is going to really help people to do what? To actually invest in those things. And then the other issue that this government need to do is to create an environment that is very good for business to thrive, to create a friendly tax regime without exorbitant taxes, so that people have the freedom to be able to invest without fear of being targeted by the regime. So 3 things I've talked about. 1, ensure that there is a free flow of capital. 2, ensure that there is environment. And 3, ensure that there is available market within and out of the country.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. So there was quite a great and interesting discussion here when we talk about the state of the economy generally, getting to delve into issues that surround the economy, getting to open our eyes on issues that we would otherwise not have known. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Ronald Bossy, who is an audit finance expert and also the group managing partner for Ronald's LLP. It was a great discussion. On behalf of everyone who has made this a success, I want to wish you a good night till next Friday. My name is Eugene Ochieng Kwach.